Welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. On today's show, I talk to IFTA award-winning directors Rob and Ronan Burke. Rob and Ronan work as a duo and individually, and their credits include TV series like Harry Wild, Red Rock, Netflix's Free Rein, Find Me in Paris, and the feature films Damo and Ivor the Movie and Standby. On today's show, we discuss how they started in the industry, directing as a duo, the role their short films played in growing their careers, the challenges they faced making their debut feature film Standby and the lessons they learned, the differences between directing television and feature films, and much more. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thank you for listening. Rob and Ronan Burke, thank you very much for joining me. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with the two of you.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
What I might do, just because we are audio only as well, is I might actually get you each just to introduce yourselves so people can orient themselves to your voices.
I'm Ronan Burke.
And I'm Rob Burke. Probably sound pretty similar, but we'll hopefully be able to distinguish the difference.
Right.
So, look, let's start, I guess, at the beginning. How did the two of you come to want to work in film and television?
Well, for my part, I was always into creative stuff. Like I was into music and I was into acting and I was into drawing and stuff like that. And at the sort of, as I got towards the end of high school, I was very interested in acting, and when I went into college at UCD, I did a lot of stuff in dram soc, both acting and directing plays. And I kind of, not exactly deep down, but I was pretty conscious of the fact that I'd rather be making films. And simultaneously, Rob had gone off to DIT to study film and broadcasting, a communications degree. And he said, I was saying, what's this film and broadcasting thing? Like this was 20 odd years ago, And he was like, oh, well, today we watched Blade Runner and we all sat around and then talked about it, And I was kind of, this is it. You can do this for college, And it sounded pretty good. And he said, yeah, there's a course that, an MA course that it sort of runs for a year that truncates a lot of what they studied over a couple of years. And so I said, I was kind of at a crossroads as to what I was going to do. And so I just decided to go for it, and I took it from there. So that's how I got into it, Rob. I don't know whether you want to.
I think that I wasn't as I didn't have the same kind of artistic interests in terms of theater and things like that, and the music. I was a bit more sporty and stuff, but there was one constant in the house was watching movies, and from a very young age, probably a lot of people's experience is that and particularly our father's influence. He was a big movie buff, so we were watching stuff on videotape and going to the video store. And we moved to the US when we were quite young. I was 4, and we had HBO and Showtime, so we were constantly consuming movies, watching Raising Arizona or Aliens or whatever.
Our father had very little concept of what was appropriate to watch at the time. We went to RoboCop when it came out in the theaters. I think I was maybe 12 and Rob was 8 or something. And he came in one day and he was like, there's a great movie on tonight. You guys should watch. And we're like, what's it called? And he goes, it's called Taxi Driver. And it's got an actor called Robert De Niro. And we were like, okay, all right, we thought it was really boring at the time, this guy driving around in a cab all day. But I've since come to appreciate it more,
I think that was a big influence, just constantly. And Ronan had branched out outside of kind of more mainstream films and started watching a lot of David Lynch and more independent stuff like Steven Soderbergh and
Van Sant and pretty much American oddball movies.
And so I think that when it came to going to college, my parents were like, what are you interested in? And I was literally, I'm interested in movies and sports. And they were like, okay, we'll apply for these things. And I just happened to get into DIT, and then once I was there, I knew it was the right place. It was like I was totally bitten by the bug, and I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I didn't think about any safety net or backup plan, which is the smart thing to do. It was just like, I'm gonna figure out how to do this.
So at what point then did you start working together in that space and kind of making that decision to go, why don't we try and make our own films or make our own work?
Well, we were both making short films in DIT at the same time during the year that I was there, and helping each other out and critiquing edits and stuff like that. And we discovered, or we didn't discover, because we'd always kind of been into very similar stuff. Whereas I would interest Rob in, like, maybe whatever, My Own Private Idaho or Drugstore Cowboy, and he would convince me that Jurassic Park was worth watching. And so we kind of had an appreciation for each other's tastes, and a respect for each other's tastes, and we were helping each other make these short films. And then we each made a short film separately, both of which kind of did reasonably well on the festival circuit and were well received. And when it came to do one outside of college, we just thought, why don't we try it together, and we might as well, and see what happens. And that was like the most successful short we made. So we thought, okay, that was Jelly Baby, which went, all over the world in over 60 film festivals worldwide, and won a good few awards. And again, was written by Rein. But yeah, it did so. So we did so we were always like, okay, so this seems to work, so let's keep going with this.
And what was that experience like then when you did decide to collaborate? Like, was there any clashing of heads? And I ask this because, in a sense, I'm actually very jealous, because many years ago when I was starting out, me and my brother set up a production company. Did not go particularly well. We didn't know what we were doing, and subsequently fell apart. It was difficult, and I found it, I think both of us would say now, we also found it difficult to manage the disagreements we were having about the direction maybe we wanted things to go individually. So I was curious about your own experience when you did start to collaborate like that.
I think with Jelly Baby, we saw things very similar. Like when we storyboarded that film, or should I say Ronan storyboarded it, because I can't draw, but we storyboarded a large amount of the film, and it was, every time we went to sort of draw a shot, it was, and I have to say the script was very conjured up a lot of images. So it was written in a very visual manner. It was one of the reasons that, one of the reasons we got to work together on that is because I read the script that Pierce had, and I really wanted to do it. I was jealous, and I said, can I help? Can I do this with you? And Ronan graciously said, yeah. So, and it was like, let's see how it goes. As Ronan said, we'd already been helping each other's out with our films to the extent that it felt like we were already doing it together. So I think that we rarely disagreed. We still rarely disagree, but we just saw things the same way. I think growing up and watching the same movies and having the same sensibilities and being taught by the same people, like we very much came up together. Even though I was doing the degree in DIT, he joined and did the MA while I was in my second year. And we were always kind of talking, and we were living together, and it was like, just like constantly being in this film obsessed bubble. And I think we just, through this weird process of osmosis, started seeing things the same way. We'd bring different things to it, but rarely would we be disagreeing. And particularly at that point when you're starting out as well, you're not always so sure of yourself, I think, and you're kind of like defer sometimes a little bit, and that goes for other people as well. Like, we had like PJ Dillon shooting that film, so it was like, PJ, what do you think? You know what I mean? And he'd be like, well, I think this, and we go, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? So it's, and we had Pierce and John. Like, I think that we had a great team as well. And so everybody was bringing good ideas to it. Like, we would sit in the pub with Pierce and John and like hash over the script and come up with ideas for making it better. And it just seemed to work. But would you agree, Ronan?
Yeah, totally. I think that, everything you said is true, and I can't really add to it, really, to be honest.
I think when we do, of course we disagree, but we trust each other. And I think that's a big part of it. Like I was listening to I listened to the podcast you did with the Lakelands boys, and I really, related to what they were saying about how they work together. Like it totally felt very similar to what I would say about how we do. It's about trust, and it's also about, like, if somebody feels really strongly about it, whoever has the best argument tends to win. If we do kind of clash on something, it's like usually one of us will go, okay, you know what? You feel really strongly about this. I trust you. This must be the way to go.
I mean, what's funny is like we never do something really. I don't think we're ever go in a situation where we go, okay, we'll do it both ways. We usually I'd say 99% of the time decide, okay, we'll do it this way because, and I don't know why that is. I think it's because we like to do stuff with intention, and not just, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, try different. I mean, we will try different things, but it's never in a sense, we never have to resolve an agreement by doing something multiple ways.
Yeah.
There's usually no time to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I would add that's a real benefit of it, like we've both directed separately, particularly when we're starting off, and more so now. We've both, directed separately for, it depends on the project and what's involved. But it's really nice to have someone to say, to bounce ideas off of, because when you're on your own, you're kind of on your own, and that can be. I've done it both ways, and it's better to have someone there with you.
It's also really great at the start. I think when you're starting out as a director, there's so much pressure, and you're always questioning yourself and feeling, am I doing the right thing? And feeling like everyone's looking at me, and I don't know what, I'm just got imposter syndrome or whatever. But we didn't really have a lot of that experience because we had the two of us to back each other up and kind of look at each other and go, yeah, this is good. And I think that really helped and give us confidence, you know what I mean, moving forward. So we, that's something that I think is a benefit of it.
You mentioned, Rob, that when you did Jelly Baby, Ronan did the storyboards there. How do you guys then go about division of directing duties when you work together? Or is that something, again, that just kind of, there's a synergy to it and it just happens as it happens and it's straight down the middle? Or are one of you maybe more involved with performers? Is one person more involved with the visual side of things? How does it come together?
I think largely we tackle it as one unit, Ronan obviously has more experience he did when we were starting out with acting and dealing with actors. And I think, I don't know, I might have had slightly more technical expertise because I had 4 years of college in film school and probably covered a bit more stuff than he did in his 1 year. But really, it's a unit. We tackle it as a unit. Like the only thing I would say we started doing later on when we were doing TV together, which had a high page count and a lot of scenes, we did start kind of doing this thing where we each take a scene to shot list. If it wasn't a big set piece, we'd like go, okay, this is day 11. We've got this many scenes. You do that. I'll do day 12. And then we'd sit down and go over it together and go, yeah, that makes sense. I got that. Okay. just to divide the labor up, because when you're doing that much material, it makes sense to but if it was
rather than sitting there together, sorry to interrupt, rather than sitting there together and sort of coming up with each shot, you come home from shooting, you're looking at the next day's shooting. If you've got 10 scenes, it's rather than sitting down and going through each shot for each, every shot for every scene together, it would probably, you got to move a little bit quicker than that,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like we would always confer on performance and things like after a take, but there are certain situations when you're moving very fast. Like for example, like Red Rock, we never directed together on Red Rock. It was just too manic, like too fast paced. And from a practical and a financial point of view, like we couldn't split the fee. As co-directors, we will split a fee. So that's a concern. So. But generally, yeah, we tackle it all together,
So you mentioned Jelly Baby, which I think was 2005, and how far it traveled. You were nominated for an IFTA. Then in 2010 with Runners, you won IFTA for Best Short Film. I would love to just maybe dig into those films in in a broad sense, and maybe just talk about the difference between each of them in terms of your learning and maybe what you potentially did differently. And I know it's a good while ago now, on Runners than you did on Jelly Baby, or how far do you feel you had come between those two films in terms of growing as directors?
To go in the way, way back machine. Yeah, it's an interesting question though, because they're both very different films. Like one is a kind of, I don't know, an attempt to do a slightly Tim Burton-esque fairy tale kind of thing, and the other one is well, they're not as stylized as Tim Burton, and the other one is a kind of more realism, handheld cameras, kind of very gritty, very.
I would say I'm one of the things that, I mean, apart from the fact we had more experience, I don't think we would have been able to shoot the amount of stuff we did on Runners on Jelly Baby. I think we shot more, but the script was longer, so we had to shoot faster, but we had experience with that, and we sort of knew we were going to shoot handheld, and you know, we had a shorthand. We were working with PJ again, and we trusted him and gave him a lot of like leeway to kind of push things along with us. You know what I mean? And we had a great team. We had Sean Griffin as the first AD. Like we knew we were gonna. I think the first cut of the film was like half an hour or something. It was like maybe more. Like we shot a lot of material, so I think that was one of the differences. If I'm not wrong, Ronan, like whereas we wouldn't have been. I don't think we would have had the confidence to be able to shoot that much stuff in Jelly Baby at that stage.
Yeah, but I suppose the style freed us up a bit more as well, you know, because Jelly Baby was very precisely shot with a lot of tracking shots, whereas Runners was very much handheld, almost 90% of it.
Yeah.
Ronan, you said you like to do things with intention. So I suppose in making that next film that was such a different style, what was the intention there? Was it to show that you could, or just to flex a different muscle and test yourselves?
I think it was a bit of both. You know, I think it was basically, you know, Pierce wrote the script. Pierce showed us the script. We were like, it was nothing like Pierce had ever wrote before either. And we were like, wow, this is crazy. Like it's a chance to do something really gritty, and sort of like the Wire was just finishing up at the time, and we were watching The Shield and all these kind of shows that were like all handheld with kind of different kind of approaches. Well, The Shield kind of had a funky kind of exposure, you know, and so yeah, we definitely were in the mood to do something down and dirty, if you like, you know, and so and at the time, I think it was people were shooting a lot of the shorts were starting to shoot on 2K and stuff like that, and we were like, no, let's do it 16 mil handheld. We shot a lot of exteriors on it as well, which would have been available light. And it was kind of freeing and liberating for us, because all of the stuff we'd done, whether it was a DIT or whether it was after DIT, which is basically Jelly Baby, had been quite controlled and precise in the way that it was done, in the sense that we do storyboards and we know every shot. You could look at like the storyboards and kind of almost predict the edit, you know, and so this was totally different, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did board it, but we used an app like this thing called Frame Forge. So actually, I did the storyboards on this one.
Yeah, because I can't work computers, but Rob can't draw, so
there's a difference too. You know, I'm digital, he's analog. But you know, so we did board it out, and quite a lot of like the action sequences and stuff, but it was always going to be a lot more like rock and roll, a lot more handheld, and kind of, you know, go with the flow kind of thing. And that was intentional, to do something different. And just because Pierce wrote a great script and we were like, we'd love to do this, and we were lucky enough to get you know, the film boards to give us money to do it. You know, it was with the Signature series at the time, which was like their premiere short showcase or whatever. Yeah, so it was great, and it was great to show a bit of range, you know, and you know, we knew that, you know, you can get pigeonholed, and, you know, we knew that would help us try to get dramas. Like, I've no doubt that short helped us get onto Red Rock, because like we had done Roy and we had done like some other kind of tween dramas, and you know, we'd obviously done Jelly Baby, but like Runners was like, okay, they can do drama, they can do gritty, and that would sort of, you know, Red Rock started out quite like handheld rock and roll kind of grittiness, so it really helped there, I think.
That brings me, I suppose, to my next question, which was going to be, I guess, how did those shorts impact what you did next? Rob, you mentioned kind of the teen dramas, and I think that was, at least from an IMDb date perspective, it seems to be around that time then that you moved into directing those young adult teen dramas, Ashling's Diary and The Importance of Being Whatever. How did they come to be off the back of the shorts, or how did the shorts help you get in the room to get those shows?
So when we did Jelly Baby, that was a film base and a Northern Ireland Film Television Commission. It was both. We got 2 awards, which John Wallace cleverly managed to put together. I think it was a big budget. So we did film base, and that was with, and on the panel at the time, Ailish Kent was on the panel. I think she was always on the panel, and she really liked the short, and she really liked Pierce's writing, and that got us into like meetings in RTE basically. So like Pierce was developing we were all developing, but Pierce was really developing this series there. Ultimately didn't get made, but it got us to meet people like Jane Gogan and David Crane, and it got our showreel into their hands. And so when it came time for the young people's department to make their first scripted drama, Sheila DeCourcy, who was heading it up at the time, she was looking for directors, and I think she asked the drama department, "Can you give me some names?" And I think they passed on our showreel. I'm sure there were others. I know there were others, but for whatever reason, we got the call from from Trina Campbell and Bernardo, who were doing Ashling's Diary, and they were like, "Look, would you be interested in this?" And we'd never done TV before, so naturally we jumped at it. And even the budget was ridiculously low. It's probably still the lowest thing we've ever worked on, I could say, for the length of the running time or whatever.
Yeah, certainly for the ambition of it.
Yeah. So it was a baptism of fire, but we relished the opportunity, and we tackled it well. I think we had Eleanor Bowman shooting it, which is great because we were in school, we were in the same class together in DIT, which was cool. So we did that, and that led directly to the next one, which is The Importance of Being Whatever, which was Samson. David Collins and Martina Nyland were developing this thing with David and Isolde, who wrote it. And I think that because we'd done Ashling's Diary, that led to that. We got asked to meet, and we didn't act like maniacs in the meeting, so we got the job. So Ashling's Diary was like just before Runners. And then we did Runners. It was funny because we're doing something like completely different, and then we did The Importance of Being Whatever. And then that sort of opened up. We started thinking about TV like more as this could be like, could run concurrent to our interest in film, because we had initially mostly focused on film. And so we started looking for other, possible TV series to work on, And so one of them was Roy. We knew that was happening, so we just emailed the lads at Jam. We just said, "Listen, we've done some teen stuff."
Well, actually, PJ had given had made them aware of us. He'd said, these guys they won't let you down. They're good. You should check them out. And so I guess when we got in touch, they were like, "Oh yeah, right. These are the guys PJ was talking about."
That's right. Sorry, props to PJ. Which is actually brings up a really good point, because like you need help when you're starting out. Like you need people to kind of go, "Hey, I vouch for these guys," or like you need champions to support you and put. I think very hard if you don't have somebody to kind of give you a little push, or just to stand by you and say,
"Yeah, but definitely you need that."
So that was Roy, and then what did we do next? Damo and Ivor? We did Standby. We did Standby. So Standby was being developed all throughout, like Standby had a long development period. It was in the very first Catalyst project, I think.
I remember,
can't remember what year it was.
I don't know, but I want to say it was 2007.
Yeah, 2006, something like that. And it was Pierce again wrote it. We just worked with Pierce at that stage. And so he runs the script, and they got shortlisted for the Catalyst. We didn't get the award. I think it was like what was it?
Connor,
it was like
100 Mornings.
Mornings, Connor Hogan.
Rewind with Amy Huberman and Aaron Leach. Yeah.
So we didn't get the award, but had the script. It was pretty good, So we were like, let's try to get some development money. John was like, so we all went to the film board, and they knocked it back at first. This was kind of an interesting process, and they were like, no, they need to work on this a bit more. So we went back, and Pierce worked on it a bit more with some input from us, and eventually they kind of said, okay, yeah, this is maybe worth developing further, But I think they made a crucial mistake in that they made us the script editors, and there was I think they forget there was too many cooks in the chefs in the kitchen or whatever between the four of us. So it was a long, difficult development period. We didn't know how to develop a feature film at that stage. I don't feel, knowing what I know now.
No, we didn't.
I don't know
We
if you
didn't.
agree,
We
Ronan, but I
were,
think
we were very much looking at it from the outside in rather than inside out, which was, I guess, where the attention needed to be paid, and that's what I feel myself,
But we were determined to get it made. We were there was no stopping Marcel's and Pierce and John. This film was going to be made, so we just kept at it. Pierce wrote countless drafts, and we went down a lot of different roads with it. And there was one point where the film board actually offered us money to make it, but it wasn't enough. It was quite low, and we said no. We said we're not doing it at that level. So we said no, and we basically had to wait out a sort of regime change in there. And in the meantime, John went off and found Luxembourg Film Fund, David Grumbach in Luxembourg, his company at the time, and he was interested in it. So we came back, and we'd done a lot of work on the script in the meantime, and then it started to come together. But it was a long development period.
One of the things actually that you reminded me when you're talking about it there, Rob, was that in the interim between Jelly Baby and Standby, we'd obviously done Runners, and we'd done Runners with the film board, and that was the first thing, as they were known then, the film board, that was the first thing we'd done with the film board. And they couldn't see the step, some of them couldn't see the step from Runners to Standby. They were like, you're going from The Wire into this kind of bright and cheery kind of rom-com, and somebody in there actually said, it would have been easier if you'd have made Jelly Baby with us to get into to make the leap to Standby. So you do get pigeonholed, and people do develop perceptions of you, which is unfortunate. They kind of see, oh, these guys do that, you know what I mean? So that was part of an issue, and it's something that has cropped up now and again in our career, and it's wish people would be more open-minded and sort of kind of go, yeah, but have you seen the other stuff I've done?
Totally. I will come to Damo and Ivor, but one of the things I wanted to ask about that as well was, again, that thing of being pigeonholed and having done working young people's, the transition then to make a comedy like Damo and Ivor, moving into Red Rock as a drama, making features. I think what you guys are doing is really difficult because people do generally try to put you in a box, and it's hard to move out of it. But also really not necessarily good to know, but important to know, I think, that it takes so long to make feature films.
Yeah.
Not just in Ireland, but particularly with the way that soft money system is set up internationally.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the conclusion we came to, is that we wouldn't be able to survive just making feature films,
Yeah. When it came to Standby then, if we stick with that for a moment, I would love to talk about how it was cast and how you found your performers. I think Jessica Perret was in Mad Men at the time.
Yeah.
Have such a wonderful Irish cast. Tina Kelleher, Rein, obviously, Norma Sheehan, young Barry Keoghan. It's a phenomenally well-rounded cast, and I would love to know, did you attach cast prior to kind of getting greenlit in the film board, or what was the whole process like for you?
I don't think we attached them before we got greenlit. Did we, Ronan?
No, there was some interest from somebody who I don't even know if I should name, that got the film board kind of excited, and that was enough to kind of jolt the thing into life. that person didn't end up being in the film, but yeah, we basically, so we didn't. The answer is we didn't. We cast we cast after the after the funding sort of was put on the table.
But we actually started casting, like looking for our Alan for our lead, like years before. Like we did a bit of casting with Maureen Hughes and Louise Kiley ultimately did the film, but like we were looking at a lot of Irish actors. We looked at a lot, and it's so funny. At the point when we started, Rein was too young. We were like, no, like it's not going to work, you know, because he's kind of got to be in his late 20s, early 30s. He's got to have a little bit of a
little bit of world weariness.
Yeah, and we thought Rein was too fresh faced still. But by the time it came to making the film, you know, we were like, hey, we never saw Rein, like let's bring it in, and he just like nailed it. Like it was like holy shit. I guess this is why we've been waiting so long to make the film. But so that was Alan. The process with Jessica was really through our US producer. We had a guy called Lawrence Ingley who was who's based in the US, and he had contacts in agencies, particularly UTA. So he would introduce us to them. We get on a call with like one of the UTA people, and they would go through a list of actresses that were probably possibly going to be available. And like it's crazy, they have a list. They have like Kirsten Dunst on the list, and you're like, she's not going to do this movie, like, you know.
But like, yeah, get her, dude. Yeah, get her.
But they're positive over there. They're like, no, you know, anything's open on the table, we'll look at. And we were like, okay. So we went through a process of names where we said like these people would be great, and they go through the process of trying to get those people interested in it or reading the script or whatever. And so that went down to almost to the wire. Like Jessica came in quite late, you know,
very late, like very late. You know, it was
great. Like it was, you know,
it was tense.
Yeah, but she was brilliant, and she loved the script, and she was really up for it, and it was you know, so lucky to have her, really, you know, particularly as you say, because she was still doing Mad Men, so like, and that helps, you know, get people interested in the film, gets people to, you know, gets butts on seats, and she was wonderful in it, and we were very lucky,
and they got on very well, which was great. So
that's true, yeah.
And basically they met, like, I don't know, they met a couple of days before we started filming, I think, you know, in Luxembourg.
The rest of the cast, Louise Kiley did, and she did a fantastic job. I mean, a lot of those, I think, you know, she was just throwing out names, and we do, you know, auditions and stuff in person. It was still in person back then, you know, and we're really happy with that cast. We're really proud of it.
Yeah, they were great. They were great.
Hmm.
Barry Keoghan, I think, was the last person cast. We're like, who's this guy? I know it's a small part, but he's very good in it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, he is, and he was great fun as well.
People could see it at that stage. I remember the script supervisor, she was like, who is this kid? She was like, this guy is going to be a star. Like, and we're going, yeah, he's good.
I don't know if he's going to be a star.
It's such a charming film, and I remember it very clearly when it was released, because it was around the time when I was starting to try and make things, and I was a big Mad Men fan as well. But rewatching it, I was really actually nostalgic for the Dublin of that film. You shot Dublin and how Dublin looks, because it's very much the Dublin I remember of the time, you know, and I don't go out in Dublin anymore, so doesn't feel the same.
Oh, that's very nice to be to say. That was a big part of it for us. We really wanted to capture Dublin as it was at that point, and the Dublin that we kind of knew as I suppose when we started off thinking about it, we were in our 20s, but we were in our 30s, or I definitely was by the time we made it. And yeah, it was really important to try and get some authenticity. I mean, to the point that, like, you know, there's this scene that takes place on South William Street where they're walking down the street, and we just did that, you know what I mean? Like, and we did it, and we pieced it together. Like, we had very little control over, like, the people walking in and out of frame, and guys going, here, what are you doing? Are you making a film? And all this kind of stuff. And, you know, we just kind of managed to, you know, scrape it together in the edit to make it work. Like, it was really, but that was really important. Like, because people were, you know, there was always people along the way going, well, could we not just shoot it down this alleyway here, like where it's full of cardboard boxes and milk crates, you know? And I was like, we'd be going, well, no, it's not going to quite be the same unless we're like actually walking on the streets that people would walk on, and you know, in Dublin in this situation, you know. So yeah, we really pushed really hard to do that, you know. So I'm really glad to hear that that someone appreciated it, you know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that's one of the things we're most proud of, I think, you know, and it was it was very intentional, and you know, at that time during that period of development and before we made the movie, there was a lot of walking around Dublin films, as Andrew Mead called them. There was like Once and Adam and Paul and Kisses. So there was this little subgenre of walking around Dublin films, and we were like, we need to put it on screen in a way that isn't quite like what they did, but still, you know, as good, you know, and a kind of romantic version of it, but with also a little. We were really keen to have like Grogan's in the film, like they have a pint and Grogan's, you know, like or like eating a kebab and zaytoon, like classic kind of Dublin things that people do, and you know that was felt that it would feel real, you know, hopefully, you know, it's a romantic comedy and whatnot, and it's this kind of crazy night that they have together, but we wanted to keep our feet on the ground to a certain extent, you know.
Yeah, I think it worked, and it is very much, as I said, was very nostalgic. It's a very romantic version of Dublin. And another thing, and I'm sure you maybe fudged a little bit, but normally with Dublin-centric films, when the geography is incorrect, you feel it, but I didn't feel any incorrect geography as I was watching.
I'm glad you say that, because some people did. Some people can be very picky about that. Like to be like, you know, that you would never end up in that street if you've been on that street 2 seconds before, you know. But I think we took the view that, look, we wanted to feel authentic to Dubliners and to people from Ireland and stuff, but we were conscious of the fact that it's ideally it'll be watched by people in other countries, and you know, who won't really have that same issue. So let's not make, you know, perfect the enemy of good in that regard. Let's cheat a little bit here and there if we have to, you know. And actually, one of the set pieces in that takes place in the George in in the gay bar, but it's not actually the George. It's a place shot in Luxembourg that had very similar interior structure to the George, which we made up to try and look as best we could. And so many people have said, "Oh, the scene! How did you scene you shot in the George?" And we go, you know what? It's not actually the George, but thanks very much. You know,
That's a win.
yeah, exactly.
How much did you actually shoot in Luxembourg?
Half of it.
Yeah, I think it was certainly by the schedule, it was half. We did like kind of 2 weeks and 2 weeks, or a little bit more. It was, how many days was it? 25, 23, 23?
I think it was 23 to start with, and there were a few kind of pickups and maybe 1 or 2 extra days or something. I can't remember. It was a tight schedule though. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that was difficult about it was, well, 2 things actually. Shooting in Luxembourg, the architecture is completely different, obviously. So we could only really shoot interiors there, and even then it was quite a challenge. But then also shooting a film set in February in the summer when you've limited amount of night was very challenging, you know. So we had these difficult weeks in Dublin. Like Dublin was there was at least a week in night shoots, and it was quite grueling on people, you know, because there's a small window there, and Luxembourg had been quite relaxed and nice, and like we were still shooting, you know, same kind of page count, but it was a bit more comfortable. When we were in Dublin, we didn't have a proper base camp, you know, working out of hotels, and like, you know, the food was not as good. All these things that up, like, you know what I mean? I remember
There was no wine with the lunch out there was in Luxembourg, which was really disappointing. For those that, you know, don't know, it's customary in France and Brussels and I think Luxembourg to serve wine or beer at lunchtime if you request.
It's hard enough to get people back to work after break.
Yeah, exactly. So what were we saying about Standby?
We were talking about locations and so Luxembourg, yeah, that was challenging, and shooting nights in Dublin was challenging, but in summertime. Although at least it was warm. At least we weren't freezing our arses off. But like we were constantly worried about things like the trees. but then nobody cares. It's funny the things you worry about. You know, this looks like summer. You know, we're shooting outside the big tree. Is that what the pub is called?
Yeah, I think it's
And
gone, but yeah. But like we were conscious of that from the start, because we did, one of the crew members that came from Luxembourg was the script supervisor, and the first woman that we interviewed with sort of said, well, why are you shooting this in summer? And we're like, well, because it's the only time we can, or we're going to lose like our funding. And she goes, well, it's not going to look like February. And we said, well, we'll do our best. And she was like, well, we can't have any leaves on trees. We can't have any shots with trees in it. We can't have any shots with blue skies and stuff like that. And we were just like, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. I think we're going to find someone else, because like, that to us on a 23-day schedule with, multiple, like dozens of locations shot over 2 countries, we couldn't be having that kind of constraint. And as Rob says, nobody noticed anyway. I mean, some people did, but most people didn't care that, like, they were trees in full bloom in the background. It's not really under those conditions, you know what I mean? When you're not making a multi-million-dollar picture for Warner Brothers, under those conditions, you kind of have to let certain things go. Otherwise, the whole film would have been dictated by whether there was a tree here or a tree there, or.
Totally. And generally, if everyone is paying attention to the leaves on the trees in the background, we've probably lost them anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. That I think that we came to that conclusion too.
How did the process of making that film then differ from the television work you had been doing prior to it?
I would say we had a lot more control. I mean, like, a lot of TV, you're coming in and you're kind of you're a gun for hire, for not that, no disrespects, or don't mean to, but you don't have as much creative control. So, and it's not often your thing, like, you know what I mean? Like Roy, for example, that's Alan Shannon's baby. He created the world of Roy, and we're trying to follow in the footsteps of what he's created. Or Damo and Ivor, that's Andy Quirk's creation. And, so with this, is with Standby, we were free to, obviously we'd include, our heads of department and John and Pierce and stuff, but like you're much freer in what you're doing. And yeah, we could push things a lot, like particularly, like, for example, with locations, like, we had Mick Swan and he did a fantastic job, but we pushed him quite hard. Like we were like looking for a specific rooftop or whatever, and we didn't give up. And John supported us 100%. Like he went all, in terms of making sure the money went on screen. He was like, we're putting it on screen, every single cent we can, and I think that, I'm not saying that doesn't happen in TV, but I just think it was our company, and we had the say that you don't always have when you're working on other things that they're, would you agree, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, creatively, we had the final say. I think it's fair to say, certainly when we were shooting it, and mostly when we were editing it. But, it depends, because I would say, like, with Ashling's Diary and The Importance of Being Whatever, those shows didn't exist before we came in and helped make them. You know what I mean? So it was quite similar in the sense that you got to decide on the look and the feel and the locations and the actors. But just with the film, it's kind of like it's almost, it's almost 100% all has to come from you, which is, well, not, I mean, in terms of the design, you know what I mean?
Okay, your ego's getting out of control there now.
No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean, like, you get to make a lot more decisions than you might on television,
I think what you're saying is it depends on the TV show. Like I used examples there of shows that were already kind of set up, you know what I mean? But the ones you were pointing to with Ashling's Diary and Importance of Being Whatever, we were essentially the series directors, so we got to make more of those decisions on that show.
Yeah.
But with Standby, it was like, yeah, even more so that way. But obviously it's a collaboration. We had we had great heads of departments, Dave Grannon.
Yeah, I don't mean like that,
No,
I'm not trying to take away from them, but I'm saying, I guess what I'm saying is, in terms of like the final decision, you know what I mean, on a lot of things. On a television show, you might have to go to the producer for that, or you might have to go to the showrunner for that. But when you're doing something like Standby on the set, and somebody has to make the final decision, generally it's the director that gets to do it. That's all I meant.
True. Yeah.
I think sometimes of TV, at least in the sense of the work I've done, is you're kind of like on a show that's set up a ghostwriter. You come in and you just have to take care of a chapter, but you have to, it's someone else's grammar and language and everything else, right? And you can try and put a little bit of yourself or your own style in there, but you can't change the show.
Yeah. I mean, so we always give the example of like, or I always give the example of, with Game of Thrones, if somebody came in mid-season and said, so I'm going to shoot my episode in black and white. Obviously, it's up to the showrunners and the producers to go, well, we don't do black and white here. You have to stick within a previously established style.
Yeah. And were there any hard-fought lessons in making Standby, or major kind of setbacks that led to lessons learned throughout the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did. I mean, we did have to do some pickups. There's some things didn't work in the edit, and that's not unusual these days. But I think that it was a difficult development period, and maybe we didn't get everything right, and we had to make some fixes in post that required going back. Which was, as I said, is not unusual, and I think nowadays you should always have a few bob, squirreled away in the budget for that. But it was tricky because we had to bring Jessica back and she was still doing Mad Men and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there are other things. Ronan, do you have off the top of your head?
One thing I can say is that we were in discussions, as I mentioned before, we were in discussions with another actor prior to Brian coming on, and they had quite a bit of profile, and they were interested in doing it, But as we talked about it, the more we talked about it, the more we realized that they sort of had a different vision of the script, I think, and we went along trying to placate that, and trying to kind of make it more appealing in that regard, because if this person had come on board, then it would have just been an instant green light. But in the end that didn't happen, but that person didn't come on board. And in retrospect, I think looking back on it, we can sort of see, I think it's fair to say that that person didn't have the degree of enthusiasm from the outset that one might want. And so that was kind of a lesson learned. I don't think we would do that again. I think, I think we would be more kind of like, okay, well, this isn't I think we need to look for someone else,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say went as far as Pierce writing a draft, based on a meeting, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And that person disappeared, wasn't interested. That was a waste of time, and that was it's tough on Pierce getting him to do stuff like that. That's just going to be for no reason. I think the filming of it and what we ended up with in the end, even though we had to go back and shoot more stuff and post, we were pretty happy with it. The film it wasn't a big critical or commercial success or anything. It didn't light the world on fire, but it was our first film. We didn't necessarily, I think we had higher hopes in terms of what festivals it would get into. We were a little bit disappointed, that it didn't get into something like Tribeca or South by Southwest or something with a bit more profile and stuff like that. But it's the first film, you can't hit it out of the park. You can't make Reservoir Dogs or Donnie Darko every time out, your first time. So, but we're very proud of it and very happy with it. I think the biggest lessons we learned were in development and just being the first film that we developed, a feature film. I think it's kind of no surprise that it was a bit of a struggle,
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I think, as I said, it's a charming film and it works brilliantly. Films very rarely, I feel, end up where we want them to go. but it's a great film. I loved it, so definitely work to be proud of.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we are proud of it. And I have to say, you know, it's a lot of great stuff has come from it. It's one of the things that's cited by producers that have hired us for TV. So in depth, like it was, you know, it stood us well, you know what I mean? So it worked out well in the end, even if it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a critical, you know, or you know, commercial success. It was a success for us, you know.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is a thread I would love to pull, which is how the film has impacted you moving forward. I think what I see or observe at the moment is when directors are moving into different types of television, from shorts. There's a lot of Irish directors in particular, Kate Dolan or Liam Gavin as examples, who have made that from short, feature, and then over to telly, as opposed to going through the telly ranks. And I would love to know then what was the impact of Standby for you guys in moving into bigger TV shows?
Well, I would say it got us an agent, you know, because and we had been kind of trying to figure out when we should try to get an agent, and we decided to wait and until that was finished, and we managed to get an agent before it was released, and so that led to more opportunities in the UK and Ireland as well, and I suppose it helped us. I think we sent the trailer to Ruth Carter, who produced Damo and Ivor, when we had an idea they were probably going to do a second season, and so when she saw that, she called us in to meet for it because Rob Quinn was unavailable. He did the first season, so it was things like that. It was beneficial to getting other work, certainly in TV. I mean, I know that like the job that we got in the UK, Free Rein for Netflix, that was definitely helped with that big time. What do you think, Ronan? Am I missing anything there?
I think there was a certain, I don't know if cachet is the right word, but let's use it to sort of go, okay, they've made a feature that, you know, had, let's say, a 1.5 million investment, but also they've done it well. It looks well. And I think experienced producers could tell that it was a fairly low budget film, but that we had done as much as we had been ambitious and made it look and done a lot with the money in terms of making it look good. And I think people responded to that.
Just looking at Damo and Ivor, just because you mentioned it again there, Rob, you mentioned Standby in the trailer for that potentially helping when you approached Ruth. So this may negate the entire question, but I was curious then about making that jump to straight comedy as opposed to maybe comedy drama type work, and was that a hard sell?
I don't think so, because we'd also done Roy, which is quite like wacky and kind of like Damo's a bit wacky. It's high, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and I think it was people we'd worked with, Ruth had worked with, so that helped as well. Like, so she didn't know us, but she could call someone and go, are these guys, you know, are they a safe bet or whatever? Because that's a big part of it. Like, it's not just like, I would say, I'll get back to the comments thing. I think like, you know, knowing that the people that you're hiring are going to be able to get the job done and do it well and do it on time and stuff. So, but the comedy for Damo, because we had seen the first series, we knew where it was going to be, where it had to be pitched at, and you know, it's very much Andy's baby, and you know, like I think it wasn't that difficult. That one, would you agree, Ron? We just sort of picked up where they started in season one, you know.
I think the fact that there'd always been a comedic element to a lot of the stuff we'd done, just made people think that feel easy enough in giving us straight comedy. You know, like Jelly Baby is a black comedy. Standby is a romantic comedy. Runners is not a comedy. But but we've done enough in the realm of comedy, I think, to make I think Ruth and whoever feel and Andy feel comfortable with us doing that. We obviously were, had some funny bones.
Earlier on, you mentioned runners helping with the move into Red Rock, which is a show I think that is still sorely missed as a homegrown Irish drama. Was Red Rock the first time that you both kind of properly directed individually?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, because like I said before, we made shorts in college separately in terms of we directed them separately, but we kind of helped each other out with them in various different ways. But yeah, Red Rock was the first time we took on separate, directing separately. And that was interesting. And Red Rock was such a baptism of fire, especially in the early days. I mean, it started in the autumn of, was it 2014, I think? And it was like, I think I was in block 8 or the 8th block or something like that. And then Rod did the 9th block.
I thought it was like, didn't Matt Carter do the first two, then Lisa, then you, and then Town Hall? I feel like.
Could have been that. Yeah, it could have been block 4 or so. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Early days, and it was really, really challenging, and it was common for people to drop, 7 scenes a day and then have to pick them up. And I remember I was like, sort of, my blocks stretched over Christmas. So basically I kind of, I'd shot half of it before Christmas and was supposed to shoot half of it after Christmas. But I think I had like 22 scenes to pick up in January. Like that, something crazy like that. I mean, because it really was. I mean, they hadn't found their groove yet. As when they got into their groove and we got into the groove, it would be unheard of to have that many scenes to pick up. You'd really be expected to have no scenes to pick up.
I should say I completed my first day half an hour early.
Rob came in and ruined everything because he came in and he finished early, and everyone was like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? He comes in here and he just fucking finishes like on early, and like, I've got 3 scenes to pick up. So, yes, Rob, congratulations.
I'm teasing, but the what you're saying is true. Basically, it took a while to find the production model. So the first few blocks, and because it was the first episodes, they wanted them to be as strong as possible. I think they gave people a little bit more leeway, a little bit more rope.
Yeah.
No.
No, go ahead.
No, I think it's an interesting thing because they were figuring out how many scenes, how many pages, how many locations, how many sets can we shoot in without going over, and that's what was happening during that period. And they were really just finding the right balance, like you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it took a while to figure that out. Yeah, definitely. But once it was figured out, it worked quite well. Surprisingly well, considering the amount of work that was. It was very, very dependent, though, on the actors being able to deliver under pressure, in 1 or 2 takes, and that was, without those actors being able to do that, they were brilliant at it. It would have been impossible, I think,
And I mean, same goes for the crew. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Making sure it was sharp or that we got that line or whatever. And it was really tough. I loved it, and it's sorely missed, but like it was difficult to sustain that kind of pressure, I think. It's very tough on everybody, but I miss it dearly.
I miss it too. But what we learned from that was, as directors, I think, is how little you can get away with, in terms of, if you're under pressure and you need to make something work, sometimes you could do a take and you're going like, Christ, I'm really not sure about that, but I think I've got enough there to put it together in the editing room and make it work, which was a good lesson to learn, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely sharpened us as directors. We never had to push ourselves that hard in terms of and being able to work at speed, that speed, and learning little tricks like whether it be keeping the camera running and just standing beside the actor and the DP and talking them through the scene and, going reset, okay, go again, like those little techniques you can learn to make things go quicker. It definitely really taught us how to shoot fast and high page counts. The only problem is that, a lot of the time you could end up shooting things the same, like you're getting into a lot of situations where you're shooting like a wide and singles or 2 shots and singles, and you have to be really careful with so many scenes that you're always aware of how you're opening the scene and how you're closing the scene, so you're not just cutting to the same kind of shot every time, without using a transition shot. So yeah, it certainly thinking on your feet was.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 16 pages a day was like nothing, like it was that was, Peter McKenna, who was the creator, the head writer and the showrunner, used to say, like, if you can do this, you can do anything, like in terms of any show, if you can get through this. That was, I think, his way of encouraging us, keeping our spirits up,
So I have kind of a 2-part question. And first part being, were there any kind of learning curves for you each as individuals, kind of going in and directing solo in that sense and not having that support that you kind of spoke about earlier, Ronan? And then the other part of that was just going to be about your prep then for that show and prepping on your own and what you were doing, because no time storyboard, you just shot this thing, or what did that look like?
I mean, I was certainly nervous going into my first block, especially going solo. I think I had a little bit easier because Ronan had been there already, and he was able to give me a few pointers and sort of say, watch out for this, or reassure me, that they had a great crew and cast, and to so I had an advantage, which is why I finished on time that first day. But yeah, I think it was a little bit scary, but because you're moving so fast, it quickly that quickly dissipated. I think that you don't have, in that situation, you don't have time to freak out, or certainly you better not. But I think you just got to get on with it. And what do you think, Ron? Do you remember what it was like going into your first block?
Yeah, I mean, when my first block I went into, like, I think my first day I went and shot 2 scenes, and then they said, okay, you have to go now and sit down in the office and twiddle your thumbs while somebody else picks up 7 scenes. So that was like, this is certainly a weird introduction to this show. And people were coming in going, aren't you shooting? I go, no, somebody else is picking up something, I don't know. And so yeah, it was kind of a bit unnerving, and you're kind of like going, well, what am I got myself into? This is kind of crazy. But yeah, I guess what I learned from it is that, to shoot as few takes as possible, and to get up a momentum. And it's like, okay, I've got 12 scenes, I'm gonna shoot 6 scenes before lunch, and if then I'll know I'm in a good place. If I only shoot 5, I'm in an okay place, but if I'm only shot 4, then I'm, so it was kind of time management, I guess is what I'm talking about, really, at the end of the day, and not being, again, making perfect the enemy of good.
I think for me, I'm, because we did quite a bit of it. I discovered quickly early on that the key was the schedule. What I would focus on as soon as I got my scripts was like, okay, how many scenes do I have? Where are they? What scenes could I possibly drop if I really had to? And how do I schedule them at the end of the day? You know what I mean? And how do I change the location of certain sets so that I can run scenes together and maybe put it on a Mobi and just run around the station and hoover up? Because, like, that looks good. It's moving, the camera's moving, it's a bit of production value, and it can be quick. Sound fucking hated it because it was a pain in the ass, like, because it was very difficult to mic that, Yeah. So, but it was like, so I was constantly going, how do we make this schedule doable, because it's so demanding. And so for me, I think a lot of the prep, apart from looking at your set pieces, you always look at what are the big scenes, what are the ones that aren't, I'll worry about the dialogue, heavy scenes. After I look at the set pieces and the things that are really going to stretch me in terms of time and budget, and how much time do I think I need for that. And like the part of the breakdown of the schedule was you'd have days outside on location in Dunleary or Howth or something like that. They usually had like 1 to 2 days doing that, and then the rest were on around the John Player factory. So it was like 6 days and 2 days. So for me, as I said, just figure out how to schedule it, and you'd work with the scheduler. Sandra there would be, and I'd be going into her all the time and going, can we do this? Can we do that? With this scene, work in this room, that means that we don't need, and we can go straight into this. And it was all about time management.
Yeah, cutting down on moves.
It's like, where's the directing going on? But at first I was like, I got to make sure I can complete this, and then I can focus in on the performances and the story, and because it was so fast moving.
How many episodes were you shooting per block?
So it started out as 4 kind of half hours per block, and then at a certain point in season 2 or the second year, they switched mid-year to like hour-long episodes, 44-minute episodes, and so it went from 4 to 2. But they were basically just combining the 2 episodes into one. But yeah, so it was pretty demanding, but great fun. I mean, really, really fun. I have to say.
One thing that also became very handy and very important was to sort of try and grab the actors who, when they weren't shooting, to go through the storylines for what you were shooting and talk about the scripts and talk about the dialogue, and just see that everybody was on the same page, because there was no time for there was very little time, if no time, to sort of change things on the fly. Things ended up being changed on the fly, but if somebody had an issue with the scene or a line, or the way the character was going, it was much better obviously to try and do that before you ended up getting on the floor. And that became a thing that became really important. I mean, it always is in any production, but it could often be on Red Rock. You just pass someone in the corridor and be like, by the way, when you kill that guy in the scene we're doing tomorrow, you're okay with that, right? And they'd be like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really freeing, there wasn't like you were allowed to, bring a lot of yourself to it, which was really cool as well, and there was, when you would get into trouble like that, there would be producers there in the writer's room to spring into action, which was great. Like particularly if you weren't going to be able to come back to that location. Like I remember being out on location one day, and we got to lunchtime, and it would just been a fucking horrible morning. Like every time he went out into location to a place he hadn't been, especially in interior, it was going to slow everything right down, because no one knows the place. You got a light, you got to bring everybody in, and everyone's got to get, comfortable with the space. And so Paul Walker would ring me and go, how's it going? I was going, I'll go, oh, it's fucked. I'm not going to make this day. And you say, what can we do? And I said, well, can we do, so we're on the phone at lunch, can we cut this? Can we change this? Can we move that around? And he'll go, yeah. And then he'll come back to the ideas, and then I'll be, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then suddenly there's a new script by the time lunch is over, and we're like, we're going to make the day. And we did make the day, it was, and days like that is like, it's really scary and stressful, but it's also exhilarating. It's like, it's kind of like, the only thing I compare it to is like a game of sports, a game of basketball, when it's going down to the wire and the clock's ticking down, and you're down by 3, and you got to, score 3 to tie the game or whatever. That's fun, but doing that all the time, like by the end of your block, you're like, I need a fucking break from this. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know how the crew and the gas would do it all the time, it's tough, I'm sure it's very crazy how you do Fair City, you do other stuff, EastEnders, right? It must be the same manic kind of pace,
I think it is, but at least with those shows, you have your multi-camera in the studio, you're on pads, you have a vision mixer, you're kind of watching, which I don't think you had on Red Rock, right?
We had monitors.
Yeah, no, but it wasn't the same setup. No, it's more like a single camera drama with 2 cameras. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there was some stuff was pre-lit, obviously, like, you know, the police station and that, and you could go in there and throw on the lights and there wouldn't be much to do. Like, you know, Kieran or Declan would be ready in like 5 minutes, you know, but they were amazing. Without those guys, like, you know.
Did we answer those two questions? I don't feel like we did. I think we just spiraled off into whatever we wanted to talk about.
It's all great stuff, so it's good. I think it's probably all answered kind of within that. The second part of it was just kind of about the approach to prep when you were doing a show like that then.
Well, I mean, it was, I guess, similar to every other, you know, television program in that, you know, you'd want to go through and look at the script and see where your set pieces were for those episodes and then start thinking about them and then maybe doing a preliminary shot list. There wasn't there wasn't any time for storyboarding really, or there wasn't even really any time for, I mean, I think we'd have one production meeting with whoever was available at the time, you know, in terms of production. There would be one or two story meetings and tone meetings and script meetings, which were good as well. But yeah, it was all very, you know, and then you'd have to go and find locations, you know, and they had a great locations guy called Dave O'Mara who was able to work wonders with locations and stuff like that. So it was similar to other stuff. It was just a little, you know, and very often you'd be walking around the John Player factory trying to find a corner of the John Player factory that could pass for like a nightclub, you know, or something like that. You know, if we hung a mirror ball there and put in a smoke machine, maybe this could be a nightclub, you know, and that kind of stuff. So like really, you know, really forcing you to be very creative within limitations, you know.
It sounds like it was a really interesting environment and one in which you can continue to learn. Like it's kind of like a pressure cooker of problem solving.
And yeah, and see, and the problem was it was also ambitious, you know, so it had to be good. And it was like everybody wanted it to be the best that it could. So that was where, you know, I'm going to be facetious, but that was where the challenge was, you know, in terms of like, it wasn't just, I only say this because I don't want to sound like it was all about like banging it out and blam, bam, bam, bam. It was very ambitious and there was storylines that, you know, had really great, you know, sort of twists in it and, you know, kind of, you know, great, the characters going through things, and it was all surprising, you know, so it was a real challenge, you know, on all fronts.
The casting on the guest actors, we got to do a lot of casting outside of the main cast. Like they would always have little guests, you know, roles, which was really fun. And we used to have people in, you know, do it in person, and Louise Kiley around that. It was really good.
Karen was very instrumental in that.
Yep.
Karen Scully, sorry. Yeah.
Post Red Rock, you kind of continue to work as a duo and you take projects individually as well, and you work as solo directors. I was wondering, is there a process for identifying the ones that become the Rob and Ronan projects versus the ones that become Rob or Ronan? Or is that just down to personal preference and I like this one, I don't think it's for me? Ron, you also mentioned earlier the fee and having to split a fee, and that could be a factor.
It's the main factor. I mean, I think it's the financial imperative is what made us have to do that. We love to work together all the time, but it's just not viable without earning megabucks. You know what I mean? So yeah, when I'm trying to think. So we did Red Rock separately. Then we did a bunch of stuff together. We were doing it at the same time we were doing Red Rock. We did Free Rein, and we did the Damo movie, and we started doing Find Me in Paris. So I suppose we started working separately on Harry Wild, I suppose. What was really cool about that was that we were doing it together as series directors. Like we were making all the creative decisions that we got to make as series directors together, and then going off and individually doing blocks. What was really cool about that was there was a consistency and a coherence and a communication there. Like one of the things about, working on blocks on other shows is the directors aren't always talking, and a lot of the time they're making decisions for each other without knowing it. Like I've had instances where like we come into a location that's already been decided upon, and it doesn't work for the script at all. Like where's this, where's that?
Doesn't work for your script.
Yeah, because because the first block director, as is their right, they got to choose a location, but they don't know what's happening in episode 10, and they write it, and then you have to go back and go, well, look, this doesn't work. Like, from what are we going to have to change this or whatever? It's a great way to work on a series where we're both on it separately, can make enough money, and have the creative control to share the vision. And although I have done work with other directors who are very collaborative, it's not like it can work that way. It's just that the communication lines have to be open.
Yeah, in particular in Harry Wild, there was a scene and there was a whole episode that Rob had to do that was set in the pub during a storm, with various different groups splintering off into different groups and chatting in different areas of the pub and blah, 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 blah. And so, I directed the first 4 episodes, but I was always conscious of the fact that when we were looking for the pub, that I knew that Rob had this huge, this huge episode where it was all about the pub, and that he had very specific requirements. So I was able to look out for that, whereas, that mightn't happen in other situations.
Yeah. So to go back to your question, it's really a financial thing, but also there was an instance in the year before I did Spellbound season 1 and you did Clean Sweep, and that was probably decided because Ronan's based in Dublin, whereas I'm between Dublin and Slovakia. I live in Slovakia, so I was like, look, I'll go to Paris, you stay in Dublin, makes sense,
Thanks, Rob.
But also, we got to do the drama. I was doing the same kind of thing we'd done before. So
yeah. I know, it just sounds, look, I'll go to Paris, you stay in Dublin.
How did Find Me in Paris come to be then?
So that was a direct result of having done Free Rein for Netflix. Like that was a good example of work begetting work, that like they were looking for. It was the second season, and they were looking for a director to do half the episodes. They already had one from season 1, but the other director from season 1 wasn't returning. So they saw Free Rein, which had a lot of stunts and a lot of doubles and action horses and things, and they thought that us having worked with doubles meant that we would be able to do the dance sequences there's a lot of double action in the ballet and the hip hop and stuff. So that, and it came through our agent, and we didn't. That was one of those ones where it was, we went in super prepped. We watched all these episodes, and the interview went really smoothly. It was almost like they decided, and we got the job. It's kind of, their interviews they're really funny. They're always different.
Sometimes you have to do 3 or 4 interviews. Sometimes you don't have to do any, like if the people know you. And sometimes, you have these kind of ones where it's like, you're not sure how they went, or, very different experiences.
I was going to actually ask the question about the interview process for that. And when you're going in, you're pitching season 2, you've watched season 1, you have a good sense of the show. Are you really in there pitching yourself as opposed to your vision for the show, because the show already exists, I suppose? And in this case, maybe they knew your work, so maybe you don't have to sell yourself quite so much. But what was that like for you?
I definitely think it's depends. Like with a pre-established show, sometimes they will ask, what would you do better, or could you improve on this in any way? And sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's more just about, as you say, kind of pitching yourself rather than pitching the show. But it's often very hard to come up with an answer to what would you do better with the show, especially since, like, if the show is good, But we haven't actually been asked that question too often, which is a good thing, I think.
Well, I can remember the one instance where we were on a job
Yeah.
and we
were shooting Free Rein in the middle of Wales, like on the coast of Wales, like getting battered with wind and rain day in, day out for 14 hours.
we took an interview, even though we were flat out busy. So it was very difficult to prep and to and like it was after a long day, and we opened up the Zoom. There's like 10 executives there on the Zoom.
We thought it was just going to be a chat, but then there's like 10 executives.
And
yeah.
the first question is this kind of very stern person, and they go like, there's no chit chat, like there's no and it was just like, so what did you not like, and what would you do better? And we were just like waffling through it, trying not to say anything. We came out with some sort of answer that vaguely resembled an answer.
I think we said something like, maybe the camera could be more dynamic. Stock answers, and
it was a lesson. It was a lesson, and be careful when you take interviews. Make sure that you have the time to prepare and to be prepared for everything.
I was going to ask, Find Me in Paris, in terms of your schedule. Rob, you were talking about kind of some of the lessons you learned maybe on Red Rock in terms of really picking that schedule apart. I was curious with that show whether you were kind of, with the two timelines, were you block shooting timelines or locations, or how did you structure that?
It's an interesting one. That show, the way they scheduled that show was different than anything we'd done before. So they also, the way that the period of engagement as directors, we were engaged for the whole shoot, both us and the other director, and they do it by location, and they do it around the Opera House in Paris. Basically, they're a partner with the producers, and they give access to the company for the show for a set number of days in August, and outside of that, there's no access. So everything was built around the Opera House and the ballet sequences, which tended to be up front, and most of the location shooting was in Paris, and then in Brussels it was basically studio stuff and much higher page counts. So we'd have you could have as little as a 3-page day in Paris, but it could be big set piece stuff on the Opera Garnier stage or in the hallways or the staircases, and it could be hip hop sequence or dance or whatever, or VFX. And so so it was weird in that it was kind of lighter days as such. They looked lighter in page count, but they were very heavy in terms of what you were shooting, and then much longer, bigger page counts in Brussels in the studio. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that more or less does. Like I said, as I watched, I was conscious of the costuming and the turnaround times on certain things, and I was curious to know maybe what way some of it was structured.
Yeah, we had a great first AD who actually, they had someone that scheduled, primarily just scheduled. He wasn't on the floor as much, and he had a relationship with the opera, and he knew what we could do and what we couldn't. But it's a really interesting question in regards to the costume and the makeup, because some of it's quite ornate, and some of the costumes there wouldn't be doubles for, and there'd be all sorts of. So it was a very carefully timed out schedule. What we would do, what I find useful, is that we try to do a preliminary shot list before we recce, or at least after the first recce, because you might have a few recces, so that you can have a good sense of the workload, and that's how you can dictate what's going to work and what's not going to work in the schedule. We would go do a provisional shot list, and then say, look, this is not enough time. You're going to have to give us more time there. Push this scene somewhere else, or what have you, or vice versa. We're going to be done before lunch with this. Put something else in there, and maximize the time. Yeah.
So a difficult part of the job, I think, is we don't always get to work at home, and we have to be away for long periods of time. It sounds like you guys were away for a long period of time for Find Me in Paris. And I think it's something people are beginning to talk about a little bit more in the industry, about how we maybe find some balance between this all-consuming job that we have to do, which is a privilege to do, and it's brilliant. But I was just curious to get your take on that experience, or are there ways that maybe you have seen over the last number of years of working away from home a lot, that the industry as a whole could maybe better improve that aspect of the jobs we do?
I think this point kind of applies more to you, Rob, but you know, it's certainly been in different countries. But one thing I would say is that, you know, we've worked a lot in Paris and Brussels over the last 3 or 4 years, and they have a shorter work day than we do here. They work from well, you report at 8 for prep, which is a kind of, you might do a bit of blocking, and the other departments get, you know, get ready, or do, like, you know, well, you don't shoot till 9, and then, you know, you finish shooting at 6 with an hour for lunch, and it's a lot more it's a lot more, you know, like a regular type job, if you like. You know, it's kind of like working from 9 till 6 or 8 till 6. And it what's nice about it is that people actually get to have a bit of an evening or a bit of a life and kind of relax. And it means everybody is in better form. And, you know, it probably, you shoot less every week, but you might, there are a lot of benefits to it, you know what I mean? And it might mean that, you know, the shoot has to be a week longer, but if everybody's happier and healthier, and, you know, it's I think there's something to be said for that, you know. So that's their standard day. But and it's, I mean, they're doing that here a little bit in a different way with continuous days, but it's not quite the same thing. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I feel strongly about this in terms of, it's very hard to sustain a career directing in Ireland only. I mean, it's just not possible, you know, unless you're on really the top paying jobs, I guess, you know, or you work a lot or whatever. So one of the things that we didn't do that I wonder should we have done earlier in our career is go to the UK and you know, do some of the shows over there, the continuing dramas and things like that. Because, you know, one of the sorely missed aspects of Red Rock, frankly, is the regular work at home, you know. It's so it's difficult. You know, I love working in Paris, and I'd go back there in a heartbeat, but I don't live in Dublin anymore, so I miss it even more. I wish I could work at home more. But you kind of you go where the work is at that particular moment in that time. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people, not just directors, you know, other, you know, actors, heads of department, they prefer to work at home. You know, there's more stuff being made at home than ever before, but there's more, obviously the industry's growing, there's more people, there's more competition. So it can be, you know, it can be difficult finding those jobs or competing for those jobs. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is. You know, if it was even more work, maybe there'd be enough for all of us to work at home, but it's just, you know, it's not always possible. So I'm grateful for the work abroad as well, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for your insights. I know it's a very big and broad question, and there's not an easy answer or a quick fix, but it's just something that strikes me every now and again, in terms of it being a potential sacrifice or downside of being in the very privileged position of working in a brilliant industry and doing jobs that we love doing.
It's tough. I mean, I would say there's a significant mental health aspect to it as well. You know what I mean? That, like, you know, you're freelance, you don't know where the next job's going to come from. That's tough. You know what I mean? Especially if you've got a family or whatever, like there's all sorts of aspects to it that, you know, so it's the greatest job, but it's a great industry, but it comes at a cost, you know what I mean? To a degree, to your, you know, to the time that you have available at home or for your family or to your mental health. But, you know, I think that's experience and, you know, learning to figure out when is the right time for you to say, okay, I'm doing this now, and I think I'm on the right track to say that this is this is a viable career and stuff, because that can be tricky, I think, you know what I mean? Like I was still bartending when, I don't know, just before we did Influencer Being Whatever, and we did that in 2011, 2010, 2011. So I was able to leave it behind, but I never knew. I was like, am I going to have to, we were doing a bit of teaching and stuff as well, but like, you don't, it's kind of scary, you know what I mean? Especially if you don't have a backup, like we don't, like I can't go off and go back on my law degree or whatever,
Totally. I kind of asked this question already earlier, specifically thinking of Standby. But in Standby, Alice says to Alan, we learn nothing from success. And I'm inclined to agree. I think we learn most from our failures, our setbacks. So have there been any failures or setbacks that you guys have faced together or individually, which have manifested as major lessons or turning points in your careers?
I feel like I answered that in that, for me, there's a certain naivety in us going into this as co-directors, not thinking about the financial side of it. When you're, whatever we were, like 21 or whatever, and going, oh, because you never have any money at that age, so you're used to it, and you don't, all you want to you do is do what you are interested in, what excites you, and that obviously has been a challenge, splitting a fee and figuring out how to get to a point where we can, work together and separately and earn enough money. That's quite a practical answer. The other thing was, I think I said, is maybe going to the UK and working up the ladder there, continuing drama. Like, I think one of the great things about Red Rock was having that reliable bit of work coming back every year, and it was like a short bit of block of work that you could go off, do that, and come back. Whereas in the last few years, we've been doing like one big job a year, and that's fine if you can get that one big job a year that's going to sustain you. So having going to the UK, like a lot of directors do, I think is worth considering. So what do you think, Ronan?
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I think another thing that it's not so much I suppose it's kind of a setback, but it basically, when we were making Standby, or trying to get Standby made, rather, we had we kind of developed a tunnel vision with it. We were kind of very dogged and put, like, 80 to 90% of our, or maybe not that much, but a lot of our energy into making sure that got made and doing whatever we could to get it made. And like, it was kind of like putting all our chips on Standby. And I think so when it was finally made, we didn't really have anything else developed to the extent that we could fall back on that. So I guess I think we both regret not really, having a few things on the boil, rather than developing an obsession with getting one project made. I think it's better to spread your chips around a bit, to continue that metaphor.
That said, I think, what it did teach us was, if you really, really want to make the film, you'd probably find a way to make it. If you just refuse to let go, that some way you get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that was a lesson we kind of learned, because when the dust kind of settled, we were kind of like, okay, so what are we going to do now? We had developed one or two things, but we hadn't really got them along enough to the point where, something tangible could occur.
It's a tough one, right? Because you have to be, I think, that level of dogged to get something done and over the line. But very valuable advice to have in terms of when someone says, what's next? Making sure it's something, I suppose. Something I ask frequently is, in terms of your own careers, and this could also not be film related necessarily, but do you guys have any recommended reads or resources that you're like, this thing really opens something up for me?
Well, I always come back to Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez, because that was one of the first film books I read. I think it was you gave it to me, Ronan. You read it first, but that was incredibly inspiring as a young person starting out in their journey into film. And it's quite practical as well. There's all sorts of great little mad bits of advice that, and it's entertaining, and it's sort of like a dream come true. Like it's ridiculous how he goes from, this small film to the heights of Hollywood. So it's a fun read. And I just read David Milch's book, Life's Work, and that's great as well. That's more philosophical in some ways, but it's also, it's not just about writing. It's very much about directing, because he was essentially a showrunner. So there's lots of good advice in there. What do you think, Ronan?
My favorite sort of textbook, if you like, is Shot by Shot by Stephen Katz, which is a really practical, it's like a big blue book. It's a really practical guide to filmmaking in terms of lenses and how to cover a scene, and the difference between long and wide, and the difference between the line of access, and all this kind of really practical advice. But what's nice about it also goes into like the history of cinema, and the development of the continuity editing style, and it's got everything you need in there really to get started. And then I also like Bruce Robinson's autobiography, Smoking in Bed. It's not really an autobiography. It's more like an interview where he just kind of talks about his experiences writing and directing, and he's a very entertaining character, and very as I'm sure you know. And there's just something about that. Pierce gave that book to me a long time ago, and I go back to it frequently to cheer myself up, if things are going wrong, because even when you're successful, it seems a lot of things go wrong.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Last question. What is next, or is there anything specific you guys are working on at the minute?
Well, script. It's a feature length. I guess it's comedy drama, kind of coming of age teen film. It's about a young guy who's got a terrible acne problem, and he decides to. It's really bad, and he decides to become a goth to hide it. And in doing so, he goes on a sort of a journey of self-discovery about who he is, and with the help of his uncle, who's full of bad advice. And it's sort of I don't know, how would we pitch it? It's got a bit of it's like a bit of Cobra Kai, a bit of Napoleon Dynamite. What were the other touchstones?
Well, a bit of Lady Bird as well. It's kind of, but it's obviously it's about a guy, but it's that kind of who am I kind of high school kind of vibe, and it kind of in a naturalistic style. We were also kind of talking a bit about Submarine, and that kind of the way it's kind of a droll, kind of dark kind of feel to it as well,
The way I went for the mainstream and you went for the more interesting, offbeat, independent. That's it.
Yeah, there you go.
Counterbalance to each other.
Yeah.
Deadly. Rob and Ronan, thank you very much for talking to me and indulging me and sharing so much. Really, really appreciate it, lads.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great fun. Enjoyed it.
And that is a wrap on Rob and Ronan Burke. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend and follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, if you have feedback, questions, or topics that you'd like me to cover on the show, please put them in the comment section on our Instagram page at the Filmmaker's Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director. You can find Rob on Instagram at robcoburke and Ronan at ronan.burke1. Links and social media handles are in the show notes. Join me next week when I talk to development executive Nadine Flynn. Until next time.